celebration. Simcha, Simcha, celebration of life.
Hello and welcome to Simcha, a celebration of life. With me, your host, Aaron Halevi. In today's show, we pay a visit to the friendly city of Port Elizabeth, where Jews who arrived with the British settlers of 1820 were among the founders of the city. As the second oldest organized Jewish community in South Africa, the Port Elizabeth Hebrew Congregation was established in 1862 and has functioned ever since. The Jewish Pioneers Memorial Museum, located in the original Raleigh Street Synagogue, is perhaps the most appropriate place to start a tour on the history of the Jewish community of this city.
Port Elizabeth is a wonderful place, and I'm always fascinated by the history. Started originally in 1820 when the 1820 settlers landed in Port Elizabeth, landed on the beach which is right behind us. Were then taken by ox wagon to Grahamstown and to that area where they worked, and they were brought out from England because England wanted more settlers in that area to protect the area.
The four families that arrived off the ship were the Nordens, the Nortons, the Simons and the Slomans. There were 18 of them. So the Nordens and the Nortons were related, and they travelled generally together. The families went up to Grahamstown, which was a major trading centre at the time, and settled there for a while. The families then decided it was maybe a little bit too much for them, and they went on to Johannesburg, and the one family went down to Cape Town, were instrumental in the foundation of the first garden shawl.
The main immigration into the Eastern Cape only came in the 1900s, early 1900s, particularly in the 1920s. Before that, there was a very, very small community in Port Elizabeth. But then, after the First World War, then massive immigration took place from Eastern Europe, particularly Latvia, Lithuania, Poland, and that's when the community grew in Port Elizabeth.
The Western Road Synagogue was built in 1864 in Western Road, and it was a British Jewry shawl, so it was an upstairs-downstairs seating. At the time, the Western Road Synagogue was the second oldest synagogue in South Africa. Then the first lot of Eastern European Jews arrived, and they came into PE and went to shul on the first opportunity they could. Unfortunately, they were very religious Jews, and the Western Road Synagogue had a mixed choir and played an organ, so that wasn't to their liking, so they didn't participate, and they set up their own shul.
My earliest recollection of this shul is very much of a Lithuanian, Latvian character, and most of the congregants whom I recollect were immigrants, and many of these sermons rendered by Rabbi Valenchik were done in Yiddish at the time, which was appreciated by the congregation because most understood the language very well. And that continued for a good number of years until it eventually got to a stage where services were discontinued, the building was deconsecrated and no longer served as a shul.
So as the community shrunk and they found it more and more difficult to run the two shuls independently, they got together and decided that maybe it's time to close up the two shuls and have one shul together, which is what they did. And the Western Road Synagogue then was sold and destroyed, and a block of flats now resides on that property. This community was quite adamant that it wouldn't happen to this building, and a group of gentlemen got together and formed the Synagogue and Youth Foundation Trust, so that this building was safe from that kind of thing. The first curator, Effie Schade, and her team got together, and it's thanks to her that we've got the museum. In the 1950s, the Glendenningville shul was opened. So today, what has happened is our Glendenningville shul has, the actual shul part has been sold. We've taken part of the building and we've erected a beautiful new synagogue, and we now reside there.
The main shul, that seated actually 646 men and 545 ladies on the gallery. It's a beautiful shul. I must say the acoustics is absolutely perfect. This present small shul was part of the big hall, and because of the diminishing numbers, this seats now 220 people, overall men and women. What is very important there are two tablets there, you can see, glass with 10 commandments, one on either side of the ark. Those were actually built into the concrete of the Western Road Shul, and I decided to save them.
When one walks into the shul, it does have an aura which is quite different from what one is used to in the old-fashioned shuls. And this ceiling, for me, gives me the feeling that it is from a biblical scene, from a tent. To me, it represents a tent. To others, it might represent something completely different. But I think it has, it's liked by most of the members of this congregation, and it's quite unique for a shul to have this modern feeling about it.
I run this library, and I have an assistant, also a volunteer. We got a lot of Judaica people donating new books in memory of their loved ones. And so we gradually expanded. And the community is very fortunate to have very devout Jews, and for them our extensive collection are used in their study groups. And I hope that we're doing something good here.
The PE Jewish Chronicle is one of WITSO's premier projects amongst the many other projects that we have. The PE Chronicle is a derivative of, long ago there was the Eastern Province Zionist Council who produced a magazine, but we took over about 42 years ago, and this magazine is now our baby. It goes to all WITSO members, ex-residents, expats. We send about a third of our publication overseas to people who are still interested in Port Elizabeth. It is funded by the advertisers, donations, and just voluntary contributions. The Chronicle is published 4 times a year. At the end of the year, then round about Pesach, and September for Yontif, and at the end of the year as well.
The shul was built in 1953. We're a very small congregation, unfortunately, and it's probably 120, 130 members in total, whereas in days gone by, we would get that many attending our Holy Day services. So in the last, I've been a member here less than 20 years. In that time, we've shrunk probably to half of what we were.
Welcome back. Although the size of the Jewish community of Port Elizabeth has diminished consistently since the turn of the millennium, the community remains committed to its sustainability. Originally established as a Jewish day school for the community, Theodore Herzl School has continued to thrive for more than half a century and is today one of South Africa's top independent co-educational schools.
The school itself was established in 1959, and so we're on to our 57th year and has an outstanding track record, academically, sporting, and whatever. And the matriculation class now has a history of well over 30 years of 100% pass rate. And that's achieved by the character of the school, the personality of the teachers, the attitude of pupils who study in an environment which is acceptable to them, and who work in a very happy atmosphere.
I'm head of Judaica at the Theodor Herzl School, and I'm involved with all the children, the Jewish children at the school, from pre-primary level, 3-year-olds, right till 18, in the matric children, in one way or another, either in Hebrew or Judaica, and sometimes with both. And I think the most interesting thing is what we do in the high school, because Hebrew is only compulsory up to the end of grade 9. We have introduced what we call here Jewish time, which is a lesson, the first lesson of the day, every day, starts with all the Jewish children from grade 8 to matric meeting right here in our shul. And we have discussion, mainly discussion, sometimes presentation of topics, but mainly discussions to do with topics that concern any aspect of Judaism or Israel, and that is what we do in that time.
The demography of the school has changed somewhat in keeping with the change in the Port Elizabeth Jewish community, which is now much smaller than it was years gone by. So current enrollment on this campus, which is the pre-primary school, the primary school and the senior school, is now about 460 pupils, of whom a smaller percentage, perhaps 5%, are Jewish. However, the character and the tradition of the school remains unchanged, and it's conducted according to Orthodox Jewish tradition. All the festivals, the Chagim, are celebrated. The school campus is closed on Shabbat, and in all respects, the traditions of Judaism are maintained, and, if I may say, and respected by the non-Jewish pupils, who are very happy to be involved in this atmosphere.
One of the highlights of the year is definitely, and it's a Jewish holiday, is Purim. Purim that's the first thing that came to mind. We've had it as a tradition from pre-primary to high school, and all 3 schools get together and we just have a day or a morning where we're all together and we see the interactions between the 3 different schools, and it's a really nice thing to see. It makes you feel proud to be a Jew in the school. It's a very close school. We all feel like a family. Jewish students, non-Jewish students, everyone in the family everyone in the school feels like a family. It just rolls off the tongue to say family instead of school, and the tolerance that everyone has for one another.
The fact that we are a Jewish minority at a Jewish school, I think it further encourages everyone to tolerate the Jewish students at the school. Not that there's ever been any issue with tolerance at the school. We have many, many different cultures from all over the world, as well as a lot of different cultures within South Africa, people with different religions and cultures and races. And I think that the fact that it's a Jewish school, and the fact that Judaism values education in such a high regard, I think everyone at school respects everyone, because we all know that we're here to learn and we all have a common goal. So the fact that we are a Jewish minority, I think it does definitely further everyone's tolerance for everyone, not just only the Jewish kids at the school.
Where Theodor Herzl, I think, is an iconic and unique situation is that, first and foremost, it's a Jewish school. And I'm not Jewish, and that's perhaps what the irony is, the whole thing, is that as the head of the school, I'm not Jewish. But what intrigued me by the whole situation is that despite enormous number of challenges, the school has maintained its Jewish ethos. But it's unique in the sense that, yes, it is a Jewish school, but it is multicultural and non-denominational. And there's a huge contrast there already, but it opens up a window of opportunity, because with the universal values that come with the Jewish education and Jewish culture and religion, is that it's still been maintained and in fact is the cornerstones of the school. So you might very well have a situation where a Jewish festival or holiday is on the calendar. We have a very, very small percentage of children in the school that are Jewish, but in spite of that, the Jewish children then celebrate that particular occasion. It might be Rosh Hashanah, etc. And then what actually happens, the children who are not Jewish actually understand that this is important to the Jewish children in the school. They show respect and tolerance for that, and as a result they themselves understand that we are different from each other, and there's a celebration of diversity which leads to tolerance, empathy and respect.
So I'm standing here in the shul in the synagogue of the Theodor Herzl School. This facility has fantastic memories and history, and I'm happy just to tell you a few things about the contents of the shul. First of all, the furniture and fittings came from the shuls in Kirkwood and Willamore. When those congregations discontinued, then the contents were collected and brought here to open the original shul. So it's wonderful that the memories of those communities are recollected and remembered in this way.
I've been at Theodore my whole life, basically, ever since I was 3, and I just love it here. It's absolutely amazing. The atmosphere and just the overall togetherness of the kids and the teachers is just amazing. I started doing the davening on Fridays, but now today was the first time I did the whole davening. Yeah, I was quite nervous, but once I got into it, I was absolutely fine, because I've experienced it over a long period of time.
After attending a course at the International School for Holocaust Studies at Yad Vashem, the World Holocaust Remembrance Center in Jerusalem, ex-teacher Merle Katz decided to establish an adult Holocaust study group in Port Elizabeth. For the past 23 years, this dedicated group continues to meet every month.
April the 7th, exactly a month virtually before the end of the war, 2,500 prisoners were ordered to march 10 kilometers to the city of Kel, where they were then put on a train, and after 6 days in the train suddenly stopped. The SS guards were ordered to destroy the train and drown the passengers if they were unable to reach their destination. Now, why weren't they able to reach their destination? The bridge had been blown up. And Frank Towers was part of the tank division of the US Army, which arrived on the spot. And he then becomes responsible for organizing taking the prisoners off the train. When they saw the tanks, they screamed, "We are Jews, we are Jews." The Holocaust Study Group has been going for 23 years, and we have a meeting about once a month. I would say we probably have about 10 meetings a year, and by and large the group is very committed, and they come very willingly and are very disappointed when they can't attend.
Merle is so devoted and so dedicated to her work, and it's a privilege to have been through this course with her. Why do I come? A, because I'm learning. B, because it's a social evening too. 3, because I think we all feel Merle is doing so amazing. We must at least support. We must support her, and we do. We really, really do support her. We love it. We would miss it dreadfully if she stopped.
The evenings are most interesting, but because of the work that Merle does before the evening, these Holocaust evenings they're well prepared, they're well documented, she presents them well, they're educational, but I think the most important thing of all of it is that it teaches us to remember never to forget. And I think that's why I'm back every time.
I've read many books on the Holocaust, but when you actually hear somebody speaking about the experience and so clearly, you can actually visualize it. I mean, it's one thing to read about the conditions of the people in the cattle cars. It's another thing entirely to hear somebody describe it. So that's the value I get out of coming to these meetings.
Every time I go to these Holocaust study groups, I go home and I can't sleep. I think and I go more deeply into it. And I came to the realization when I went on the March of the Living with Merle and Arnie and with Raina and with Charles, my husband, and myself, that you have to know what it's all about in order to make Never Again a reality. Before we went on the March of the Living, we went every week for talks, for kind of preparation, which of course there's no preparation. But at the end of the day, you came away from that knowing that in order for the Never Again to be a reality, you have to be informed and you have to learn. So this has been an amazing study group for us.
I think that the time I spent at Yad Vashem was a life-changing experience for me, because from that point on it became my passion to know more and more. Not that it answered all the questions. I still feel that Holocaust education stretches the comprehension levels to the limit. And the more you know, in actual fact, the more devastating it seems. And there are still so many questions. Who, how, what, why? And it continues to be my passion and my challenge at the moment.
The area where we are now is the original cemetery in Port Elizabeth. Aaron Solomon, whose grave is behind me, was buried here in 1863. You might notice that the gravestones in this area, all point east or west. I'm assuming that this is because our forefathers knew that Jerusalem was to the east of Europe. South Africa, it's to the north. And in the new part of the cemetery, it's changed so that all the stones face north now.
Our graves at the moment, I think, are up to about 2,600 or 2,700. But then we must remember that a lot of the very early graves are not numbered. So there are no numbers for those. So there may be 400 or 500 graves there, which they only started numbering the graves many years after the cemetery was founded. Port Elizabeth has grown over the years. The Jewish community at one time numbered 5,000 souls. Unfortunately, it has diminished a lot, but it's a very dedicated community that we have here. Because we're a small community, every person is very important. Every person knows the importance. We have people who serve on committees, we have benevolent societies, we have women's societies, Jewish societies, who all do wonderful work. And I'm happy to be a member of those societies and to carry on maintaining the Jewish presence in Port Elizabeth.
Well, that's all we have for this week's episode of Simcha, a celebration of life. As always, we'd love to hear from you, so please send us a message on Facebook at Spirit Sister Productions. From me, Aaron Halevi, and the rest of the Simcha team, have a wonderful week ahead.